webinar on how to choose the right volunteer organization for you. If you don't know me, my name is Fadi, and you'll see a picture of me in a second. And I'm joined here with my co-founder, Ron.
Hey.
That was a very stern, very assertive. I like it. We're still waiting. We're still waiting for a couple of people to join, but we'll just get started for now. And I just want to thank the Salesforce Foundation for advertising this webinar really, really well. And I want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us. We've got people signing up from the UK, from Germany, Canada, and the US. So we're really excited to be doing this. And we have a couple of past volunteers on the call, Paul and Tova. And so they might just pipe in if they have anything that they want to say at any point. You guys feel free. If you have any questions for them, also feel free to do that. And I've muted everybody just for the sake of everyone's ears and comfort. I'm not sure how loud or quiet your offices or environments are, so I've just muted everybody for now. But you can interact with us through the chat box. We'll just make sure that we continue to monitor that and to answer any questions that you may have. And welcome to those who are joining us now. We're just getting started, so you have not missed anything. And this webinar is being recorded as well, and I'll send you a recording of that tomorrow, and so you don't have to take any notes or anything right now, beyond anything personal. So this webinar is all about giving you guys tips to choose the right volunteer organization for you. So this is not a webinar where we talk about venture to impact or our organization specifically, but this is just a webinar where we help you think through a series of questions or things that you need to consider or think about as you go about selecting a volunteer organization or a volunteer opportunity. And I decided to name this as Don't Be Someone Else's Tool or Someone's Tool, because a lot of times volunteers are used as tools. Hey, come and move bricks from one side of the village to the other side of the village, or hey, come and do this for us. And no one, or rarely, people invest in the volunteers and help the volunteers understand the bigger picture and how they can really create impact and live really impactful stories for themselves and for their communities. So the hope here is that we give you tips and provide you with a little bit of education on what happens on the organization side to prevent you from being a tool and make sure that you're being a very effective volunteer. This is just a visual for you guys, just so you know who's talking to you. I'm the good-looking guy.
I was going to say that. I'm the good-looking guy.
This is recorded. We have to grow up. So I'm the guy in the blue shirt. My name is Fadi, originally Jordanian. Been here for a while. Met Ron 10 years ago because I needed to drive. And 10 years later, we're still doing this together. And
not much else to add to that. We're both very, very passionate about development, so hopefully that'll come through.
Very excited to be talking to you about this. Before we start with our kind of topic of the day, I really wanted to talk just about our mission and why we do what we do, because that's going to frame up the advice and the tips that we give you, and it's going to help you get a context of who we are and why we look at things in a certain way. So our mission is to transform individuals, families, and communities out of poverty and into lasting well-being. What that means is that it's really all about the transformation. So for communities on the ground, what we're looking to do is that we're looking to listen and partner and collaborate with community mobilizers, with individuals, and with organizations on the ground to explore ways that we can work with community members and with communities to create programs in the areas of education and economic development to help them transform out of poverty in a sustainable way. On the volunteer side, what we really want to transform is this idea that you can come and save the world in a week. We want to get you in as a volunteer to contribute in meaningful and authentic ways that only you can contribute in. So we don't want you to come and paint a wall, because that's something that anybody can do, including community members on the ground. We want to get you to work with us and provide your skills and your really technical point of view that only you can provide. And through that, we want to ask you to join us in conversations and dialogues about what it means to be in poverty, or what it means to live a good story, and invite communities to live in a good, meaningful story, because these things are going to impact the way that you look at development. So that's just kind of our mission and how we view things from an NGO perspective, I guess. Ron, over to you.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here on our first point. So one of the things that happens is that I think all development organizations, even ours, feel this constant tension between delivering true impact while also maintaining the interests of stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I particularly mean donors and volunteers. And so the temptation is to keep donors and volunteers on board by appealing to their sympathies. And this can be a really strong temptation, but it unfortunately sometimes, and actually often, works against the impact that you want to deliver. So let me give you an example of this. Just imagine that I or an organization wanted to pitch to stakeholders to get involved in Haiti. And so what you do is you show them lots of pictures of the recognizably, quote unquote, poor people, and then you present a need. Let's say, just for speculation here, just let's say clothing. And so what happens then is people are mobilized to give money, to give clothes. Volunteers are mobilized to give their time. Some of them will travel to Haiti and just help distribute it. And those who actually go to Haiti to do the distribution will see some of the desperation firsthand that people are experiencing. And so they become regular contributors to the development organization because their sympathy has been aroused. And those same people then will usually come home. They'll feel really good about what they did and about themselves, and they'll help recruit more people to that same cause. The problem is that few people will ever ask the question, is this really making a positive impact? So, for instance, development organizations or decent development organizations know that these kinds of initiatives often run the high risk of doing damage to the local economy. So if you were to imagine bringing all kinds of clothing to a place like Haiti, you could very easily put existing clothing businesses out of business, because who's going to pay for clothing when they can get it for free? And if you, as a sidebar, if you do want to watch something really interesting, there's a great documentary called Poverty Inc. that kind of explores this tension. And so many times, real and lasting impact might not look all that sexy. And it's actually challenging to get stakeholders on board and to keep them there for the long haul. So you're constantly looking for, like as a development organization, you're constantly looking for a sympathy hook, rather than actually taking the time to educate and cast a healthy vision to your stakeholders. But the danger is, and if you're just appealing to sympathy, if you're like far on the left side of the spectrum and you're just appealing to sympathy, you're actually often working against the real kind of impact that you want to deliver. Now, is Annie on the call? Because I wanted to ask her a question if she's on the call.
I don't think she is.
Okay, anyway, she's not on the call. I was going to ask her a question just because I know a little bit about her story. But I would just say on this is a key thing to remember that will help you maybe discern your way through good organizations and not so good organizations is that no organization will balance this perfectly. It's just a constant tension. You do actually have to make the things that you do interesting to the people who are volunteering for you. So there's no getting around it. But some organizations will do this better than others. So as a person who's like volunteering for an organization, if all you're feeling is that the case or that the pitch that is being made is arousing your sympathies, I think some really good questions to ask are, are you being invited to use your skills to help build something that without you, it would not exist? Like, are you really needed is essentially the question. And another really good question to ask the development organization is, how is the community actively participating and contributing to their own development? So is it you just coming in to save the day, or has the organization, the development organization, figured out how to get the whole community involved in actually delivering the impact? And then the last thing I would say is, look over any organization's literature and really try and understand how they're framing things. So, are they framing complex problems too simply? And usually when they are framing complex problems too simply, they're also usually putting out solutions that are also presented quite simply as well. I love this quote actually by Henry Mencken. He says, for every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. And those are the kinds of organizations you want to avoid.
Awesome. And just to kind of tack on to that, a lot of times as volunteers, we are presented with things that are really tangible, with things that are really easy to understand or simple as impact. The building a house or building a school. We are presented with these outputs as impact. Organizations come and talk to us and say, "Hey, come with us. You're going to build a school." But that's actually just a proof that you were there and you did something. It's not actually impact. And what that does sometimes is that it leaves a lot of assumptions and to our minds and to our imaginations. We assume that just because we built a school, education is going to improve. Although the organization that we're volunteering with or the partners on the ground did not disclose anything about their plan to attract teachers, to develop a curriculum, or do any of these things. But we just kind of contextualize, building a school and equate it with public education in the West, and we're like, well, public education here is pretty good, so building this building will probably somehow improve education. The other really popular output is building someone a home, and so you are motivated or compelled by this really strong story of someone that needs you, that is asking you to come with them and go somewhere to build someone a home that desperately needs it. Little are we ever presented with research that tells us that building someone a home in a community gives community members hope in all the wrong ways. It actually motivates people to stop renovating their homes, even if they can afford it. They will stop caring and doing simple, small fixes in hopes of landing the lottery, of being selected by an organization to go in and build their home. So the questions that you want to ask, if you're invited to go to build a school, is what do we need to know about this initiative, and how is it going to help us solve the education problem in the community? How is this organization measuring the impact? Is it just building a school? Because that's just the building. But what's the plan to transform education? So these things are called outcomes, and these things are much, much harder to measure. They're really, really hard to see in a week. You can't see those in a week. So you need to understand the organization's plan in the long term, and how is this school going to be used to actually impact education for the community in the long run. And then the other thing that you want to know, and just to kind of echo Ron's point, is that these programs and interventions, if they're outcomes, they will only work if you are doing the work in collaboration with the community, not if you are doing it for the community. You can go in and build something for someone in 3 weeks, but you cannot solve the education problem in 3 weeks by doing it for someone, especially if they are not engaged. I'm gonna give you a quick example here. In 2010, our organization built a 4-classroom school in Uganda. It was this project that we felt really motivated about. We brought a bunch of volunteers. We built the school. It was this beautiful thing where at the end of the trip, you see 4 classrooms, you're engaged. It's such a tangible thing that you're looking at that it's so elating of an experience. And then we went home, handed over the building to the community, and we went home. And we went back the following year, and we just kind of looked at the building, and we discovered that the school is dirty, uncared for. They were short staffed with teachers. They weren't doing accounting or bookkeeping, but then somehow they had extra money that they used to paint the walls at the local church. So, you know, obviously building the school didn't transform education. In fact, it just gave them this sense of entitlement because we did something for them, and now they're expecting us to go in and fix it, to give them money to hire teachers, to continue to support them. And so we had to actually sit with the leadership and work with them over 2 years to help them organize their accounting and understand the importance of that. We wanted to monitor the education standard and know how they're caring and what they're teaching to the children. And then we wanted to understand how the leadership is working and trying to optimize it. We did that for 2 years. And then when we went back in 2012, we went into a completely different school. The school was clean, it was beautiful, it was well structured, the classes were going well. And as a proof that education is getting improved, the children were excelling in their studies on a national level. So they take national examinations in Uganda, and the children from that school were not only performing well on a village scale, they were excelling on a national level. So, so although our kind of engagement was just to build a school, the outcome for us was improving and radicalizing education, and that takes more than just 3 weeks and 10 volunteers.
Excellent. Okay, so so on this one, I think what happens here is that when people are looking for a volunteer opportunity, one thing that they are rarely immediately asking is, what do I take out of it? And I think that the reason why nobody is asking that question when they're going into a volunteer experience is because it sounds really, really selfish. You know, hey, I get to go and volunteer somewhere. What's in it for me, basically? And so I think here I want to actually explain 2 things. One is that I don't actually think that it's a very selfish question at all. And the second thing is I actually think it's a really important question. So first of all, volunteers often bring ideas and preconceived notions with them that are not always the best. And I think that's just, or not always right. I think that's actually almost like anybody does when they're put in a new environment. When you're put in a new environment, you bring preconceived ideas to it. So learning and dialogue is extremely important in the volunteer process. So if this slide were a spectrum, I think on one side of the spectrum, the volunteer would actually be a tool to accomplish something, usually something fairly simple. On the other side of the spectrum, it would be that the volunteer is a valuable contributor to the success of a project, and their success as a volunteer is linked to the project's success. So the main difference there is that when the volunteer is a tool, you just use them. The development organization just uses you. You're basically free labor. But if the volunteer organization saw the volunteer as a contributor, their development and learning then matters a great deal. A developed volunteer will actually lead to more successful development. You know, so much if you were thinking about this in terms of employment standards, if I actually took an employee and put them through training, I would expect that they're going to do a much better job than an employee that doesn't get any kind of training. And also that the more developed a volunteer is, the more you can position them to contribute in complex scenarios in many different kinds of projects. So for myself, having been a volunteer on many projects before we started Venture to Impact, and actually seeing other people come out of a lot of these different projects themselves, I would say that this is the #1 most common complaint that I hear from people. They'll say something like this, you know, I just had this blank experience. It could be, I just had this transformative experience, or I just had this extremely troubling experience, which does happen sometimes. I'm actually thinking of one person in particular who was threatened on one of the trips. Nothing that the organization could protect her from, but it was just something that happened. But but nothing was actually done about it. So she had this troubling experience, or other people might have a meaningful experience. I just had this incredible experience, but there was nobody that I could talk to about it. That's the number one complaint. And so then I'll usually probe and just kind of ask some questions like, did the organization you went with spend any time debriefing you? And the answer is no. Did they address your concerns or your questions? No. Did they help you figure out how to talk to other people about your experience? No. Did they actively try and I almost kind of give up at this point, but did they actively try and teach you anything about what you were doing or why you were doing what you were doing? To that one you might get, yeah, maybe a little. But I do think that the general responses to those questions is somewhat troubling. And here's an observation, when organizations don't invest in their volunteers or their stakeholders, their tendency is to see them as potential donors more than anything else. They just want to get you to the point of being a donor. So they want to get at your sympathy. They want you to help support the project, but they don't actually really want a whole lot of your involvement. And that doesn't actually result in a meaningful volunteer experience if you're ever a part of something like that. Now, I know, Paul, you're on the line, right?
Yeah.
Can you unmute him? Or is he gone?
I think he's on the line.
Just one sec here. I have a question for Paul if we can get his audio on.
Hey, Paul. No, we can't hear you. Can you say something now?
I just heard unmuted, so I think I'm good to go now.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, okay. So I guess originally you're from India, Paul, and I know you're quite familiar with the culture there, having been there with you. And I know that so you came to our first project in India where we were essentially vetting a potential partner, so nothing too sexy. And so, given your familiarity with the country, I'm guessing that you are probably not looking to learn so much as to contribute a great deal. And so, here's my question for you: how important was what you took out of the experience, and why?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I guess maybe I'll start with a little bit of a background. I mean, last year I resolved to leverage the volunteer program we have at Salesforce to travel abroad and make a difference, right? I was a bit skeptical at first because most organizations I researched offered language immersion opportunities of construction, like Fadi mentioned earlier. Personally, I was looking for an experience that would allow me to leverage my professional skills and experience and make true impact. I mean, I wanted to help local organizations address real business challenges. Now, I came across V2I and the November trip to India. The approach resonated with me. I was excited about India. I mean, I was born in India. It's my birthplace. I've been there so many times as a tourist. I really enjoy the beauty India has to offer, but I never had this opportunity to give back. And I decided to go to India to perhaps see it under a different lens. Now, I had an incredible experience. I know we've talked about it, and I've shared, some of my sentiments and what worked great for me. But the lasting impact they had on me was the opportunity to engage with the local organization, see them functioning as a business, understanding the challenges they're facing, and they're still managing to contribute back. I mean, they're running a business, but they're still contributing back to the society. And what I wanted to do was engage with them and help them address any of the roadblocks they're seeing. So, I wasn't going there being a management consultant, but the opportunity to just sit with them, learn about what they're doing, understand some of the challenges they're facing, and collectively, as a group with other volunteers, give them some guidance and insights how to go about addressing those challenges was very powerful for me. At the end of the day, I felt like we guided them on how to address their own problems. So, what I got most out of the trip was fulfillment. I wanted to make a difference. I came back feeling that I made a real long-lasting contribution. I mean, I felt like I went to India as a volunteer. I came back as a change maker, right? So that's kind of my experience on this India trip.
Excellent, Paul. Thanks a lot. We'll just flip over to the next slide. So so I think here, I guess one thing that I would say is that any organization you go with will be somewhere on the spectrum of either doing nothing at all for the volunteers themselves or doing a lot. And the key is to find, I think, an organization that will actually invest in you. What happens is that when you go into a volunteer experience, you might not be asking what you're going to get out of it. In fact, I don't think most people are asking that question. But I can almost guarantee that coming out on the other end of a volunteer experience, you'll notice whether or not you've been taken seriously, and you'll notice whether or not you've actually made a difference or not. And so that's really important to know, that you're going to come out feeling that way. So instead of coming out wondering about it, I'm suggesting go in asking some questions, right? If you're choosing a volunteer organization, here's just a few things. Ask the organization, what's your hope for the volunteers that you bring? What do you do for the volunteer pre-trip, during the trip, post-trip? How are you educating them? How are you debriefing them? How are you helping them understand the experience? Right? If the organization struggles to give you a clear answer to that question, I would say that's probably a red flag. You're more likely to hopefully find a better organization. And I would even add and say that even if an organization doesn't appear to do much, you can actually still take the initiative and actually educate yourself and take reflection seriously. So I would say, watch documentaries, read books, on the actual volunteer experience, take a journal, and every day write down what you're experiencing. Almost demand the attention of the development organization, like corner them, ask them questions, get into discussions, don't be shy. So anyways, that's all I would say on this.
Awesome. And then one really important tip is around returners, and how many people does the organization have returning back to their trips a year after year, or trip after trip. And then the trick here is to speak to these volunteers and really try to understand why they're coming, and what's bringing them back. And one thing, just to kind of think about, and that's normal in life, and I would say it's normal in volunteering as well, that the more that people get involved, the more that people go on trips, 4 or 5 times, the more questions they're going to have, the stronger opinions that they'll bring up, and they might become more difficult to manage. But I cannot emphasize enough, they become far more invested, interested, and passionate in the work. So if the organization does not have senior people that are going to a trip time and time again, that continue to invest in the work, that's a red flag for me. That makes me worried about my own future in this organization. Am I going to be used for my skills or for my resources once or twice? And then when I start to think about deeper things, when I start to ask harder questions, when I start to ask about direction or involvement, or bring up issues that I'm experiencing, am I going to be shunned? Or am I going to be embraced? Is this opinion going to be taken seriously? Because now I'm such an invested stakeholder that the well-being of this organization and the communities that we are working in is of a serious concern to me. But now, if there's an organization that has a lot of returners, that's definitely great. My recommendation there is to ask the organization's general manager, or whoever you're talking to, the organization's contact, to speak to one of those returners to get some insight about why they keep going back on these experiences. Are they going back because the experiences are fun and because they get to travel the world? If that's what they're doing, then that's cool. And I think, a lot of people want to travel mainly as tourists, and then they carve out half a day to do a volunteering activity, and I think that's completely fine. But if your main purpose is to go out, volunteer, give your time to create impact, then answers like travel, seeing the world, oh, it's really fun, are a red flag if that's all there is. If it's fun, but then there's lots of meaning and lots of learning and lots of opportunities to contribute meaningfully. I think that's awesome. But if it's fun period or travel period, it's a red flag. And I would just say also it really depends on what you want. Like different people look for different things, and so where you are in life, what you're looking for, will determine what makes a good fit for you. But if you're looking for an impact oriented organization, you know, a question around returners and what keeps bringing them back is a really good starting point.
And even I would just add, even in a good organization, you know, they have different kinds of projects, and so you know, any one particular project might not be for you because of its focus or different things. So even within a good organization, you know, they might have different opportunities. Look for the ones that will resonate with you. On this last slide about what kind of culture are you joining, I do think this is an important question. I don't actually have a ton to say about it, but I would say that culture does matter a great deal for the organization that you choose. And I think, again, the main thing here would be to understand what you want in a volunteer experience. You know, does it line up with what the organization is offering? And I would say my simple thing to this would be really discerning. Just be discerning. And I actually have a personal bias on this slide because if you look at the things on the right, you know, those things I think will make it a more enjoyable experience when the organization is caring, when they're taking the time to educate you, when they're involved in what you would look at and say, wow, that was real development. Like we really actually made a huge difference there, long lasting impact. I would even add other things to that column, like, you know, that they challenge your thinking, they engage you in discussion, they explain the whys of what they're doing. They actually engage you versus just your labor. You know, they talk about their own failures and mistakes and the complexities that they endure. They're committed. They actually have a track record to different projects, and you know, you get a sense that they're operating with some integrity. So I think those are things about an organization's culture that will matter a whole lot to you. And I would also say that, you know, if you're interviewing, you know, senior volunteers who've gone with an organization that you're vetting, you know, culture is actually a big deal. So it's a big area to inspect. You know, just ask lots of questions, see what they say about the kind of organization, see if you resonate with it.
Awesome. So you know, I think this is kind of what we planned for this webinar, and we wanted to make sure that we leave lots of time for discussion and questions. So I've unmuted everybody. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat box if you're not in a position to talk, or if you have thoughts and you want to ask us questions on the line. We're more than happy to entertain any of your questions at this point. Well, Tova or Paul, do you guys have any questions? Not questions, but thoughts on what we've presented since you have volunteered with us in the past?
I would say, like Ron's last slide on culture, I think that's important as well. You want to make sure you travel with like-minded individuals and, you know, engage with an organization that shares similar values and you know, believes in the outputs and whatnot. I felt like Venture Impact delivered that. I'm extremely compelled to go back, and that's because I had such a great experience. So no other comment except to say that, you know, I think everything you shared is important. I don't think people spend enough time to research these opportunities. You know, they look at the destination, they look at timing, and then they're off. I think if you're truly doing it to make an impact, spend the time to research what the organization is about. You know, who are they engaging with, and what impact they plan on delivering, right? And then go from there. That's just my 2 cents.
That's a really good point, and I like that and would echo that. Whether it's us or anybody else, doing your research and understanding what you're involved in is definitely important. Okay, well, maybe we got you all pumped up, and now you're like, "This is amazing. How do I get involved?" If that's where you're at, and if that's what you're thinking, we have an opportunity coming up in 3 months. So that's coming up really soon. The June dates are full so far, so you know that we still have some spaces on the July 1st and July 8th dates, and we're going to be in Romania teaching English and computer skills to orphan young adults who we are looking for better paying jobs, and so we just want to equip them with skills to be able to be competitive and to be able to attain these jobs. If you're interested to look further into this opportunity, just go to our website, venturetoimpact.org. You can find it under current projects. You know, technically the dates to sign up have passed, but we still haven't booked our flights yet, so we're extending the dates for a little bit until we do that. So if you're interested, get your name in the hat. There's some spots left for July 1st and July 8th dates. And then the second thing that I just want to talk to you guys about is a story series that we're running. So it's all about how do you live a good story for yourself and for the communities that you want to volunteer and impact. So it's not about living a good story. You know, it's just about defining what is a good story, how do you live a good story, and how do you invite others to live into a good and impactful and really meaningful stories. So this webinar is 2 sessions. We usually offer it at a cost, but since Salesforce is such a huge stakeholder for us, this is going to be free of charge for you guys, and you can sign up at bit.ly/V2I story. And so I'll send this link as well in the email with the recording tomorrow.
And just to put a plug in this, I can guarantee you'll learn a lot in doing this. It's a great 2 little session thing. Yeah, you'll come out really kind of seeing things a little bit differently.
Yeah, definitely. And when we do this, I feel like I do it every like 2 years, and I'm like, oh my god, this is where my life is going. But I recommend it. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a really good session or series. Yeah, I think that's it on our end. We are eternally thankful to Justin at the Salesforce Foundation for promoting this webinar really heavily, for Tova and Paul for joining us as our returner volunteers, and for all of you guys for taking the time to join us on this webinar. We will make sure to send you the recording by tomorrow. And yeah, if you have any questions or if you need to get in touch with us, all of you have my contact information, so you can do it through that or through our website. And yeah, just thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks guys.